Welcome, I'm Chris Temple, and in just a minute you're going to meet a longtime friend and colleague of mine, David Tice, who over the last few years, I have to say, has arguably done his most important work of his life in bringing to the attention of the country a very real, clear and present danger, and that is the safety of our power and electricity grid, communications, and everything that goes with that here in America. David, I met many, many years ago. He was able to put this thing together basically on his own dime. When you see a snippet of Grid Down, Power Up, the title of this video, toward the end of this particular video presentation, you'll see, as I did, that this is a first-class Hollywood quality job. And fittingly, he has a very well-known actor, Dennis Quaid, who is the narrator and presenter of the documentary that he put together. And before bringing David on, I want you to watch a snippet of an interview that Dennis gave about a year or so ago as this thing started to circulate, that gave some of the whys and wherefores and a few of the high points of it. So watch this, then I'll bring on David.
Actor Dennis Quaid has done it all. From dramas to comedies, you've seen him in classics like The Right Stuff, Any Given Sunday. He even played Jerry Lee Lewis.
I keep my nails and I play with my thumb. I'm real nervous, but it sure is fun. Come on, baby, it's driving me crazy. The goodness gracious, with balls of fire.
But Dennis Quaid's now done something that nobody's ever been able to do: scare the heck out of Jesse Waters. Quaid has a new documentary out, Grid Down, Power Up, which explores the frightening possibility of our energy's grid going down.
Heat, gas for our cars, transportation for food restocking, all of it relies to some extent on electricity. But no one likes to focus on what could happen if it all suddenly is taken away.
Star of the upcoming Amazon film On a Wing and a Prayer, Dennis Quaid joins me now. So people have tried to take out our energy grid. There was some sort of attack with weapons many years ago in California.
There's been several attacks on substations. I heard about one a couple of months ago. And this is not day after tomorrow, by the way. This is tomorrow, I think. It could happen. And it's a problem that we could fix. It's basically this. In 2003, right here in New York, there was a wire that brushed up against a tree limb, and it took out the electricity for New York for 2 days. That was just a small little event. But at a GMT event, like a bad actor could take out through a Chinese balloon for all we know,
so they could have put a little something on that balloon, exploded it over the United States, and we lose power for how long?
Well, it could be up to like 30 days. But what we're talking about is a nuclear explosion up in space. A nuclear explosion in the atmosphere above the United States could unleash a burst of invisible electrical energy that within a fraction of a second could wash over this country and overload all of our most sensitive electronic devices, including the nation's power grid. Just 30 days without electricity, it would take us back to 1880, and you wouldn't be able to get gas, you wouldn't be able to get food. The police would stay home, take care of their own families. We'd be
and you can't even survive 3 days without water, and it would affect the water system as well.
Yes, exactly. We keep talking about it, but nothing ever gets done.
Again, the question I'd ask, we've taken it seriously, what have we actually done other than literally admire the problem?
There are plans for hurricanes, there are plans for snowstorms, there are plans for earthquakes. There is no plan for a cyber attack that would be infinitely longer in duration and more widespread than any of those natural disasters.
Energy companies don't want to pay for it. The utilities companies don't want to pay for it. It's something that we could put in our budget over time and We get about $50 billion of a, what is it, a $5 trillion budget that we have. But over time, this is something that if it does happen, it's going to make the COVID look like a kid's show.
Wow. I mean, 50 billion, we send that to Ukraine in about a week.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be that much to do.
And I am joined now by my good friend of a long, long time, David Tice, joining me today from his home in Texas. David, thanks for taking the time.
Glad to be with you and your listeners, Chris.
Well, you know, you and I have known one another for a long time. And folks, once upon a time, for those that don't know, David was the founder and portfolio manager of a fund called the Prudent Bear Fund, which was an actively managed mutual fund. You got a lot of notoriety with that and being a contrarian investor. You sold that fund some years back to Federated Investors and moved on. And among the things you've moved on to is more filmmaking. You already had Paul Revere Films and have done some work, but what was it, about 4 or 5 years ago, you told me about your idea of doing this documentary, which is now called Grid Down, Power Up. And I remember just you and myself and one other fellow in your hotel room one night at a conference. You gave us our early privileged screening when this was still a work in progress. And I said, wow, then. And I really say wow now, because since then, of course, you got Dennis Quaid to narrate this, who we just watched a snippet of. And this is just A+ first class job. So congratulations on that. And I want to get a little bit of the backstory of it, of all of the things that you could have done in your latest act now as a philanthropist and filmmaker. What prompted you to focus on this particular and obviously very glaring issue of the health and safety of our power grid and all the related infrastructure here in America?
Well, a couple things, Chris, and thank you for those kind words. So I consider myself a connect the dots kind of person, and I'm an analyst. And so I looked around and realized my grandkids I was really a NASA grandfather. My grandkids were 4, 3, 2, 1. Houston, we have a problem. We have a problem because we have this archaic, antiquated power grid that's been around 70 years, and we have bad guys out there, and now we have sleeper cells inside this country that would like to take down America because they do not like American hegemony, and they feel like they could take us down with critical civilian infrastructure. And I realize, even if you don't believe in bad guys, there's about a 12% probability every decade that there will be a big enough solar storm to essentially wipe out our sensitive electronics and our big transformers and take down the grid for maybe more than a couple of years. And if that happens, there has been a government commission called the EMP Commission that found that as many as 90% of Americans would perish in that kind of scenario.
Wow, that's a stunner. I mean, and we can only imagine, because as Quaid commented in that little snippet with Jesse Waters I showed before you came on, you're looking at something even just for 30 days, if much or most of the country was down for 30 days, we would be, I think, worse than back in 1880s or whatever environment, because back then people knew how to function without electricity. Today, the last thing we can do is function without electricity, without communications and stuff like that. The American people are nowhere near as resilient and self-reliant as was the case back then. And you make a good point, David, because it doesn't take necessarily a bad actor. What was the famous or infamous incident some years back, actually decades back, of a huge solar storm?
Yes, so that was more than 150 years ago. It was called the Carrington event in 1859. And to your point, Chris, about because we're so advanced, that's actually a detriment to us, because our adversaries are not as fully advanced, and therefore they're not as naive and they're not as dependent upon technology as we are. but we want to go to our cell phone and order Uber Eats, rather than pick fruit, or vegetables out of our garden. And to your point about this being worse in the 1880s, it's more likely to be almost like a zombie apocalypse, but without the zombies, in terms of Americans and neighbors even, killing each other if they've got a 10-year-old daughter or son who's starving to death, who has no water.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we could endlessly imagine about the consequences of this. Before I get into some of the stuff that's been in the news just in recent days about how this could be brought about by a bad actor, I think we need to stress that's not all that's required. I mean, we have seen in just the last few years, because of our crumbling infrastructure, our outdated infrastructure, and a lot of different things, very poor planning in some respects when it comes to our energy grid and being able to withstand emergencies and weather events. We've seen from California to a blue / left state to even your state of Texas, which is hardly a blue or left state. But was it 2 or 3 winters ago? There was a terrible emergency. A lot of power shut down when you had an unexpected big freeze. Same thing happened just this last winter, where what little bit of winter we had in North America, there were parts of Canada telling people to ration energy. Don't run your heat too much during the day because we can't handle it all. So notwithstanding how externally this could be brought to bear, that we would have a major emergency in one or more places, it's just poor planning on a part of this country, I think, isn't it, David?
It really is. And when you talk about the danger, and as far as me connecting the dots with this issue, it's not as if there aren't solutions out there that are available, and really at fairly modest cost. There's something called neutral ground blockers that can protect against E1 and E3, which is the electromagnetic pulse that comes from either a nuclear blast or a geomagnetic disturbance or a solar blast. In terms of cybersecurity hacks, there is technology available that can put on the front end of our substations or in our municipal water systems that would prevent signals from getting to microprocessors that could, create this significant damage. I don't know if your viewers saw the recent Julia Roberts movie on Netflix, Leave America Behind, which was very instructive about what a cyber attack could do.
Yikes.
I'm sorry.
Knew of that. Yeah, I knew of that movie, but I haven't seen it yet.
I'm sorry, it was Leave the World Behind.
Leave the World Behind. Wow. In the recent past, we have seen on more than one occasion, including just, I think within the last week or so, as you and I are recording this, the FBI director, Christopher Wray, came out yet again, hardly the first time he and many others have said this. And he specifically warned that China has the ability and potentially the intent to basically mess with the US, at some point. And you said earlier that there's a lot of bad actors that, for whatever reasons, we don't have to get into the specifics. They've had enough of US hegemony. They see a multipolar world coming, and if they can do it, they want to accelerate it. But what do you think about first of all, I'm going to play a little snippet here of Christopher Wray and what he had to say.
Tonight, the FBI director sounding the alarm about Chinese efforts to attack American power grids, transportation systems, and communications networks.
China's hackers are positioning on American infrastructure in preparation to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to American citizens and communities.
And Christopher Wray announcing a major takedown of a Chinese hacking operation on American soil, dubbed Volt Typhoon.
Working with our partners, the FBI ran a court-authorized on-network operation to shut down Volt Typhoon and the access it enabled. Steps China was taking, in other words, to find and prepare to destroy or degrade the civilian critical infrastructure that keeps us safe and prosperous.
Ray and other officials say China poses the world's greatest cyber threat, and they warn that Americans remain vulnerable.
About what Ray had to say. And again, it's not the first time we've heard this from him.
No, he appeared at Mike Gallagher's subcommittee about clear and present danger for China. And then he recently gave this speech at Vanderbilt. And he's talked about the fact there are more than 50 times as many cyber warriors in China as we have in America. And that they have the intent to bring us down. And Americans have become complacent because any wars or any aftermath or any ramifications of war have not been that significant on this side of the Atlantic or Pacific. But essentially, warriors utilizing special forces have for decades known that they could bring down critical civilian infrastructure and essentially impact warfare. And we know that's in the bad guys' war plans. And so it's only a matter of time. And then you throw in the fact that we've had these open southern borders for more than 2 years. Hard to say how many sleeper cells are here with, preset instructions and locations, where they're going to be called on to take action.
That's a scary thought. I'll tell you, I was many, many years ago, David, when I still lived in the Northeast, I was with a buddy of mine who lived in the Allentown, Pennsylvania area. I don't even remember to this, what particular hilltop that we hiked up to, but he said to me, look at that over there. And he pointed to this big substation in the distance. And his comment was, all I would have to do is to take out that, and I knocked out the majority of the entire Northeast United States if I hit that one place, and we've heard, and there's a couple examples in your documentary of small substations being hit and just what the domino effect could be as far as the power loss and things like that. It's remarkable. But folks, we don't want this all to be doom and gloom. One of the things I found interesting when you made your first big unveiling of Grid Down Power Up at Mark Skousen's Freedom Fest a couple of years back was when you had actually added the power up to the title of the documentary. It started out as Grid Down, and you wanted people, however, to come away with the understanding that this is not hopeless. This is not a lost cause. There is a way to protect our power supply. In fact, in the full documentary, folks, we're going to give you a taste of it in just a minute. In the full documentary, you highlight a couple of communities that have actually taken their own steps and have girded their own power grid to where a lot of these dangers could likely be mitigated. So in the action plan here, and I'm sure there's a lot that you could share with us. First of all, actually, before we get to the action plan, I want to say this. We have a country right now that I think is adrift as far as priorities. We're spending, actually borrowing billions and trillions of dollars on things that I would argue we shouldn't be, and not taking care of things we should be. We don't have affordable housing for millions of people, et cetera. What do you think it's going to take to wake up members of Congress and the Senate and policymakers? I know there are some, and many of them are quoted in your documentary, who get this, but it's certainly not at critical mass yet. What do you think needs to be done? I mean, do we need to go through a temporary dark ages to shake everybody out of this stupor, or is there some hope that we can fix this short of that?
Well, I'll give you two answers. The most likely is that it will take a disaster, and hopefully it's a smaller disaster rather than a big disaster, because our policymakers, regulators, and our public utilities don't seem to consider this, that significant of a threat. In terms of the optimistic, idealistic answer, if we have time and if our bad guys decide to forego, taking action, and we do have a couple of years, then if we have a Mothers Against Drunk Drivers scale type movement where we get enough ticked off Americans, and I say we're looking for mama bears and soccer dads that are truly outraged at this, and we're going to re-release the movie with another 4 or 5 minutes of additional hopeful solutions, and they will become even more outraged when they see how fixable this is, and for not that many $1 billion. And therefore, there are solutions out there today, but frankly, we need statesmen. We need individuals like Winston Churchill. I feel like we're right now at a period similar to 1939, after England declared war against Nazi Germany. But it wasn't until in early 1940 that the Germans started bombing London. But the English ended up having a little bit of time to get ready, and therefore it saved, I'm sure, hundreds of thousands of lives. But we need a wake-up call, and we need to take action quickly, and we can't just wait around for a few years.
Well, we certainly can't, and you're certainly doing a yeoman's work with this, David. I really appreciate it. You've opened my eyes on this to a great extent. I've always heard about these vulnerabilities that we had, but you put the facts and figures to it. In the documentary, you interview a lot of people, you quote a lot of people, and I mean, folks, this, as much as any potential issue you can think of, this really does throw away the left versus right, Republican versus Democrat. If your power grid goes down, it doesn't go down just in blue houses and leaves the red houses alone, or vice versa. Everybody is going to suffer, and I hope that that's not what it takes to get us all to understand again that we're not blue and red or left and right, but that we're Americans and we need to pull together. So David, I really appreciate what you've done. We're going to have you back down the road. I'm looking forward to, the next enhanced or augmented version. For right now, folks, however, I want to share with you a kind of a Cliff Notes version that gives some of the high points of the documentary coming up. Don't go away. And it'll give you a taste of what this is all about.
So one quick thing to end with, Chris, is that on our website at griddownpowerup.com, we have a participate tab, and it has a tab for take action now. And if you add your home address, just have a few clicks of your mouse, you can send emails, add your name to a petition, and make phone calls to your regulators, state and federal legislators, as well as members of board of directors of your public utilities. And they need to hear from us in massive quantity, and hopefully they will take that upon themselves to take action.
Well, you gave a great analogy with the Mothers Against Drunk Drivers and other popular movements that address a societal need or issue and can get everybody galvanized around it. I agree with that wholeheartedly. While you were giving that, in fact, I put on the screen a picture of your page so that folks can go there and know what it looks like and so forth. But do that, and spread the word. I think you've used the term before, David, grid warriors. We need grid warriors, people of goodwill, whatever your political persuasion or station in life. This is something that's going to affect every single one of us, and we need to take it very, very seriously. So David, thanks again. And folks, here's just a several minute piece, a condensed version of the high points from the documentary. And please do, after you watch this, make sure you keep up with us. Make sure you go to David's website, get yourself plugged in, and support this effort. So David, thank you very much for joining me again.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, I'm Dennis Quaid.
Top former energy official claims an attack on an American power grid was terrorism.
The attack was the most significant incident of domestic terrorism involving the grid that has ever occurred in the U.S.
This will be the next 9/11. No. This will be the next Pearl Harbor.
As many as 90% of Americans could die. that could literally end civilization as we know it.
Choose power up, not grid down.
You ever stop and realize how fragile all this is? Wouldn't take much to throw us right back into barbaric times. All you'd have to do would be eliminate electricity.
On August 14th, 2003, a cascade of power failures shuts down electricity in southeast Canada and across 8 northeastern states. Cities like New York are brought to a complete standstill. Hundreds of people are trapped in subway tunnels, while the traffic above becomes a nightmare of gridlock. In all, 55 million people lost power for up to 2 days. The main culprit, a sagging high-voltage power line in northern Ohio that brushed up against an overgrown tree.
We are in a very dangerous place. I just think this has to be an emergency, an urgent situation.
What would the catastrophic consequences be at a human level if you tried to live in a non-electricity world given the way we built our civilization?
On any given day, there are thousands of attempts to penetrate the networks that control systems across America's power grid, and the risks are only growing.
The real danger is that our infrastructure, in particular our electric power grids, are as vulnerable to cyber attack as the thousands upon thousands of businesses, companies, government agencies that have already been hacked over the last few months.
A massive cyber attack in 2015 left 250,000 Ukrainians without electricity. Russia hacked into their grid and cut off power.
It wiped out data at Ukrainian federal agencies. It wiped out the ability for anyone to pull money out of ATMs.
It was the first ever automated blackout tool, and a push of a button can, like a machine gun, hit all of the circuit breakers at the utility. And that's what happened. You don't build a tool like this just to use it once. You build it as a kind of repeatable attack that you can drop somewhere else and it will cause a blackout again.
John Wellinghoff was chairman of FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, a small government agency with jurisdiction over the U.S. high-voltage transmission system. Wellinghoff commissioned a study to see if a physical attack on critical transformers could trigger cascading blackouts.
It was actually a very shocking result to us that there's a very few number of substations you need to take out in the entire United States to knock out the entire grid.
Knock out the entire grid?
That's correct.
How many would it take to knock out, putting the entire country in a blackout?
Less than 20.
Metcalfe, California, 2013. Unidentified gunmen using AK-47s attacked some of the giant transformers that funnel power to Silicon Valley.
Shortly before 1 a.m., someone cut telephone cables near the substation. About a half hour later, multiple gunmen quickly fired dozens of shots at 17 transformers.
The Wall Street Journal reported that 1 minute before the police arrived, the attackers disappeared into the night. A nuclear explosion in the atmosphere above the United States could unleash a burst of invisible electrical energy that within a fraction of a second could wash over this country and overload all of our most sensitive electronic devices.
An EMP pulse is a very dangerous threat, and it's a realistic threat. If you set off a high-altitude burst EMP, every light in this hotel is going to go off, every computer is going to go off, every cell phone is going to go off.
The power of an EMP is potentially devastating, and it's an open secret among nuclear-capable countries.
We actually know that the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians have in their war plans the first strike plan to take out our electrical power system with an EMP attack. It's not speculation. We know that. We've listened to Kim Jong-un of North Korea threaten an EMP attack.
Famed insurer Lloyd's of London issued a comprehensive report about the risk of a major geomagnetic storm to the world's economy. Lloyd's pointed out that a Carrington-level extreme geomagnetic storm is almost inevitable in the future, and also mentioned that the duration of any outage could last up to 2 years.
This threat has now silently grown to where it is perhaps one of the largest natural disaster scenarios that the country could face, that society could face.
How we respond to the looming threat facing our grid will ultimately be judged by history.
If you are concerned about our electrical power system surviving, you need to let your legislator know how you feel. And if enough people make enough noise, we can get this through. I know we can get this done.
We, the people of the United States of America, the greatest country on earth, must demand that we have a reliable and defensible power grid so that our families can continue to thrive. Failure has never been an option. We got this, America. Choose power up, not grid down.
We hope you got a lot out of today's subject. Make sure you avail yourself of the resources and contacts offered today. Subscribe to this channel for future topics and opportunities. And if you have any questions, drop us a line. Thanks for tuning in.